Alright, hi everyone. My name is Ashlyn Seward, and I was given the topic of infectious agents to present for this class. So in this presentation, we're going to look at 4 different types of infectious agents, as well as how they are transmitted and how we can hopefully prevent their transmission. So to start, we're going to take a look at the 2 standards that we would most likely see that are related to this material. The first of these standards that we would probably see in the classroom is Life Science number 6, which says to distinguish among infectious agents, examples viruses, bacteria, fungi, or parasites, their transmission, and their effects on the human body. Similar to that, with just a little bit of difference in wording, is the second standard, which says to compare and contrast types of infectious agents that may infect the human body, including viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. You'll notice that both of these standards address the same 4 types of infectious agents, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. So those are the 4 types of infectious agents that this presentation is going to focus on. To understand infectious agents, we need to first understand the basics of infectious agents. So the broad and simple definition is something that infiltrates another living being. And infectious agents can infiltrate and affect several different types of living beings. Some of those would be our pets or other animals. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're mostly just going to focus on infectious agents related to humans. As I mentioned before, there's 4 different classes: viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. So we're going to start off by learning about viruses. Viruses are very small and they're non-living, and they invade the cells of living organisms. They're much smaller than the other 3 types of infectious agents, and they're also the only one that is considered to be non-living. They're the smallest type, like I just said, and they're the only agent that cannot replicate outside of a host cell because they're non-living. Once they've invaded a host cell, the virus begins to multiply. They can be made up of DNA or RNA. They'll never be made up of both, and they most often only have like 1 or 2 strands of either DNA or RNA. And these cells are protected by a coat of protein. So you'll notice they don't really share any kind of resemblance with a human cell. They don't have a cell wall, they don't have a nucleus, they don't have any of that. So the DNA or the RNA is just free floating around the cell. Then we have bacteria. They're single-celled and they are living microorganisms. They're significantly larger than viruses, but they're still very small compared to parasites and fungi. They are made up of DNA, and that DNA is surrounded by a cell wall and a membrane. And some can even have a tail, which is called a flagellum, to help them move. So bacteria are able to move on their own because they're living, and they have a cell wall and a membrane which starts to resemble more of a human cell, but they're still lacking that nucleus. Bacteria cause many different types of diseases. Some are mild, but some can be very dangerous. And I included this because this is a common misconception that many of our students may have. Not all bacteria are bad. Most are actually helpful. I know that a lot of students carry a misconception that all bacteria are harmful and bad, but the truth is most of them are actually helpful. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're really going to focus on just the bad bacteria. Then we have parasites. Parasites are a type of eukaryote. They're a larger group of organisms. And this is the first cell that we see that starts to resemble more of a human-like cell. They're larger and they have a defined nucleus. Some parasites are made up of 1 cell, but some are made up of multiple cells. So the size of parasites can vary pretty drastically. Parasites live on or in a host, and they get nutrients from that host. So that's the defining characteristic of parasites. Some cause disease, and some can cause pain, and some are never noticed, and they just kind of they die off on their own, and we never really know that they were there. The most common examples of parasites that we would likely see, especially as teachers, are lice, ticks, flatworms, and roundworms. Our 4th class is fungi. Fungi are eukaryotes, just like parasites. They have more human-like cells with a nucleus. They vary in shape and size, and there's many different types of fungi. There's actually more than 100,000 different species. So just like parasites, the size of fungi can vary pretty drastically. Fungi usually cannot move on their own, but they do reproduce by spores, which we'll talk about spores on a later slide. But some common examples of fungi are yeasts, mushrooms, and molds. Next, we're going to look at some common diseases that are caused by each of these. So viruses commonly cause influenza, which is the flu. They can cause the common cold, measles, and hepatitis. Bacteria commonly cause tuberculosis, cholera, strep throat, and tetanus. Parasites can cause malaria and scabies. And fungi often cause ringworm, fungal meningitis, and thrush. They're transmitted in different ways. So viruses are often transmitted through contact with contaminated people, and this really just happens through coughing, sneezing, and either shaking hands or just touching someone with a viral infection. They can be transmitted through contaminated food or body fluids. Bacteria are commonly transmitted through contact with contaminated people, just like viruses. They are also commonly transmitted on contaminated surfaces and food. Parasites are often transmitted through animals, even just our house pets, like our dogs and cats, can be carriers of these parasites. Blood, food, and with parasites, the food that carry parasites are often raw or undercooked. Insects and water. And fungi are often transmitted. Fungi are different than the other three. They transmit through spores, which spores are tiny. We don't normally see them with the naked eye. And these spores can be present in the air or in the soil. And ways that we pick them up as people, just like animals do, is through inhaling them and breathing them in, or through direct skin contact. Ways that we can prevent this transmission is obviously by washing our hands. We all know it, hopefully all of us do it, but definitely teaching our younger students about the importance of washing hands is our responsibility as teachers. Monitoring our pet health. So like we talked about with parasites, pets can commonly transmit and be hosts for these infectious agents, so making sure that they get regular examinations is important. Ensuring that our food is thoroughly cooked is another way to prevent transmission. Disinfecting commonly touched surfaces is important in preventing transmission. So even just, like I said, our phones, our TV remotes, our laptops, door handles, all those kind of things that we sometimes don't think about disinfecting. Covering our mouth when sneezing or coughing. Teaching younger students to cough into their shoulders or their elbows rather than their hands is important. And then this is the no-brainer, just avoiding direct contact with infected persons. Don't go up and high five, shake hands, hug on someone that you know has or just got over one of these infections. I don't think I have enough time to show you the link to this, but I included this tutorial at the end of this presentation because when I was looking on CPALMs at this standard, this is a great tutorial that popped up that would be really useful in the classroom. It takes students through the different types of infectious agents, information about them, and it provides practice problems that help to meet the standards and better understanding each of the different types of infectious agents. So this was an awesome tutorial that I found. It was really useful to me in learning the content, and I'm sure it would be useful to helping our students. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and go Bulls!